Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and today I'm coming with you to report the previous 24 hours of the war in Ukraine on day 46. Once again, the Ukrainians have shown that they have held for another 24 hours, which is half the time they were expected to last in this war altogether. And here we are on day 46, over a month and a half into this war, and we're still watching the Ukrainians hold their ground and even push the Russians back in some places. Now, before we begin tonight, there's a couple of things I'd like to cover. First, of course, y'all have seen, and I've been thanking everyone for their donations so much because we are going off tonight with the donations. First off, our group that we're supporting tonight is Mercy Corps. Mercy Corps is a wonderful charitable organization that is currently operating inside of Poland, Romania, and Ukraine, helping Ukrainian refugees adjust to their new life and giving them the monetary aid they require to buy the essentials, and also helping out Ukrainians in war-torn areas of the country and other areas that are just completely desolated by the former front lines that were once there, and making sure that those people get the care they require as well. It's an incredible organization. I believe they actually use something like 86% of the money that's donated towards them to support their cause, which is incredible. It's an incredibly high figure. It's very close, if not better, than Doctors Without Borders, which is also another incredible group to support as well. So if you were here on the stream yesterday, you may have actually heard that Matthew and me were going to go filming today, and we did, and we are bushed. We started off at like 6 o'clock this morning, and we got back at 5 o'clock this afternoon in our local time. And oh my god, was that the most tiring, longest amount of time we have ever spent on one thing, like one singular thing. It was long, but we got so much good footage today. And we also wound up going to a place, because in our video, you know, there's a place that's a little bit, I guess you could call it high security in a way. Y'all seen it when the video comes out, what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, we didn't get any video of the particular moment, but we did have some federal agents come up to us, and they were a little abrasive at the start, but after we talked to them and they talked to us, we kind of, both sides kind of got that there was a little bit of a misunderstanding going on there, and so we continued on with doing what we were doing. And I gotta say, I understand where they were coming from. You know, of course, where we were is a little bit of a, how would I say that? How would I say that in the proper wordage? It was an understandable response considering what we were around, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. So, you know, so I understood where they were coming from, but nonetheless, we did get the footage we were looking for, and so hopefully the video will be incredibly good. Now, before I move on, we're gonna revisit the donations thing, and I'm gonna see how many donations have actually been sent in, because I don't really know. Let's see what we got. Oh my gosh, $2.5 thousand. Y'all, we're already a quarter of the way towards the goal. Now, if we keep up like that all night long, look at this, Thomas Simmer. Thank you. This is wonderful. I love when we all come together and do something impressive and great like this. This lets me know that people out there still support Ukraine, because as time keeps on going on, the viewership on these streams, and it's understandable, people do get tired of things. It's dwindling more and more, but I'm so glad to see that when the call is made for support to be given to Ukraine, everyone still comes forward and does as much as they can to support them. Sadly, tonight, as y'all know, the habit of me is to put in $100 every single time, and also 10% of the proceeds of our merchandise at the moment are going to be donated to charity as well. But at the moment, we've run into a bit of a hiccup. You see, there's really no other way to put this, but my accounts have run dry at the moment, and I'm still waiting for YouTube to, give me the support I've been given on this channel. So at the moment, I'm actually still waiting. So unfortunately, I've got like $30 to my name right now, and I can't put up anything. So I hope y'all understand, but I will make sure to double down on next week's fundraiser and make sure that that one is a whopper. So hope y'all understand. I hope y'all bear with that tonight with me, because that was really sad to me today. I was like, oh man, I was like, I can't do that. And also, we, of course, had to like spend money on gas and stuff today, which got rid of the rest of what I had. So, anyways, that kind of sucked, but I hope y'all understand. So with that, we're going to go over tonight's schedule. Firstly, we've gotten a very small amount of news in Kyiv once again, because Kyiv has kind of been relegated to purely administrative news at this point, and kind of acts of wonderment. The destruction in the area has kind of been covered to the point that no one really looks at it anymore all too much. I'm saying that with a little bit of wiggle room there. It is still being covered, but not as much as so. And usually it's just people taking pictures of the same stuff. So Kyiv is really just an administrative thing. So it's going to be tied into the location unknown news tonight. Those two are going to be in the same group. We're then going to start moving on towards the southeastern area of the country, but in between we will take 3 to 5 questions from the chat, and we're also going to recognize our biggest supporters of the night in terms of the fundraiser, because I think that this is the best thing that we can ever do. It's a huge amount of help, and I've got to say, I love every single one of y'all for doing what we do. It's huge. And it makes me feel incredibly good. It makes y'all feel incredibly good. And I know that the Ukrainians that end up getting the support are extremely grateful for it. And I know they probably don't know who to thank. There's loads of people out there supporting Ukraine right now. But I'm so happy to know that our channel, the Enforcer channel, and all of our supporters can sit there and say that we did everything we could to help them out. So with that, we'll cover the Donbass area. This will include tonight the Donetsk and Luhansk areas of the Donbass, as well as Kharkiv and the area around Izium. We will then stop to take more questions. Then we will cover the Mariupol news, the news from Kherson and Mykolaiv, and then tonight, due to a little bit of popular demand, we are actually expanding our news. Not only are we going to be covering international news pertaining to the Ukraine war, we actually have included 2 bits of news tonight that are of interest that aren't really directly tied to the Ukrainian war in a way. One of these bits of news is in Serbia, and the other one's in Pakistan. And I'm going to see how much y'all like that kind of news, and if so, we may start to sprinkle in more and more international news as time goes on into the stream, so that way we can get a little bit of a broader variety, because it seems like a lot of y'all are coming here now just to hear news, like news in general, not just Ukraine news, and it seems like a lot of y'all like that, and unfortunately I can't make 2 streams where I talk about world news and Ukraine news on the same day, so I kind of have to try and include that stuff into the Ukraine news as well. So I hope y'all do enjoy that. And with that, I'm not going to filibuster any longer. We're going to get straight into the news in the Kyiv area. Starting off today, we've actually seen Zelensky speak of a peace agreement with the Russians. I do have to agree with all of the sentiments he made in the speech. They were very good. And I'll also be pausing it here and there, because we actually tried to fix the problem where y'all can't see the bottom of the screen where the taskbar is. But I couldn't actually figure that out tonight because we're on such a short schedule tonight. That we literally got home and I had to start working, and I haven't had time to figure that out yet, so I'm sorry about that. But anyways, here's the speech. If y'all can't see the speech-to-text translation on screen, I will make sure to start speaking out the text-to-speech translation. So here's the video.
люди сприймуть мир у будь-якому випадку, тому що люди хочуть, щоб ця війна закінчилась. На наших умовах, умовах незалежності, умовах України, але тим не менш, я впевнений в тому, що так, є люди, які кожна сім'я щось втратила. Є люди, які втратили дітей. Я не думаю, що їх задовольнить будь-який мир і на будь-яких умовах, і у будь-який час. Тому що це велика рана і велика трагедія втратити близьких, рідних людей. Але якщо ми говоримо не емоційно, хоча це складно, ми повинні розуміти, що будь-яка війна повинна закінчитися миром або закінчується мільйонами жертв. І все одно, навіть там, де мільйони жертв, все приходить до миру, до закінчення війни. І саме з цього ми можемо робити висновки. Так, ми повинні боротися, але боротися заради життя. Ти не можеш боротися заради пилу, коли вже нічого немає людей. І тому важливо зупинити.
I gotta pause this right here. And I gotta say, this poor guy sounds like he has been fighting this war himself on his own for these past 46 days. He sounds beat. And I understand why. Obviously he's the leader of a nation that nearly was pretty much on the cusp of defeat as far as how close the Russians had gotten to achieving their goals within the first week. And while the nation has rebounded in a miracle in a way and pushed the Russians back from most of their primary objectives entering into this war is still as stressful and probably as taxing as it was in its first days for him still. And you got to give this man nothing but respect. I really think anyone can, regardless of what side you're on, that this guy stuck with the Ukrainians. He was offered to leave here by the United States, and he refused it and said he would stay. And he's been here this entire time supporting his country and running it. You can't say that about many politicians. And I got to say that this is a real stand-up guy for doing that sort of thing. And I think that what he's saying here is very sensible. A lot of people do want this war to continue. Some people want Ukraine to retake Crimea and the Donbass, and I can understand why. I can understand both sides. Well, not both sides as in the Russian side, but I can understand both sides as in they shouldn't retake those two kind of like general regions, or they should. But you can see what he's seeing. You can see what he's saying here. If they try and focus on this path of vengeance that they're currently on in a way and trying to retake things from the Russians, this war may go on indefinitely and incur tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of extra casualties over that period of time and result in really nothing extra. And so he's saying that while a lot of people in Ukraine and a lot of people around the world want to get back at the Russians for what they've done, it may just be smart to do what the Finnish did in the Winter War and sign off on some kind of peace agreement, hopefully not losing land in the meantime. So I'm not going to interrupt his speech for too much longer. I'm going to let the great man's words be said, and so I'm going to let the video continue.
Зупинити цю війну складно, емоційно складно з точки зору бажання. Ніхто не хоче в принципі, домовлятись з людиною чи з людьми, які котували цей напад. Це все зрозуміло. І це, я вам скажу, як чоловік, як батько, я все це прекрасно розумію. Ми повинні не втрачати. Це не бажання. Це не втрачати можливості, якщо вони у нас будуть на дипломатичне рішення цього питання. Їх втрачати не можна. Ми не можемо собі дозволити вирішувати за мільйони людей, які хочуть зупинити війну. Вирішувати за них і казати, ні, ми не готові говорити, тому що це вбивці.
Sounds like a lot of y'all are saying the video is quiet. I'm sorry about that. I'm not really particularly sure why. But I am trying to make sure that the video is as loud as possible. So if this helps, I'm going to turn up my own headset audio for a short while so that way this video can be heard. Hopefully better.
Маріуполь – це таке, знаєте, серце цієї війни на сьогодні. Воно б'ється, ми воюємо, ми міцні, воно перестане Якщо битися, у нас будуть більш слабкі позиції. Вони люди, які на себе відтягнули велику кількість ворога. Чим міцніша наша позиція в Маріуполі, тим міцніша наша позиція буде на сході держави. І наші позиції будуть більш міцними в ООС. І якщо вони будуть більш міцними, то і стіл перемовин буде для нас більш наближеним, і у нас будуть переваги в діалозі з Російською Федерацією. Якщо у нас ситуація буде слабка в усіх цих напрямках, то і ми можемо не дочекатись на зустріч, тому що тоді Росія буде робити всі ці кроки, які можуть призвести до знов повернення навіть в ті міста, які зараз ми деокупували. Вони можуть піти на це. І там вже наша ситуація в перемовинах буде більш слабка і може не цікава для російської сторони. Так може бути. На жаль, ми констатуємо, ми віримо в інакший результат, ми віримо в нашу перемогу.
So I'm gonna pause this right here and kind of explain just like the general standpoint from the speech. He's saying, well, the end part, he's actually talking about Mariupol, so we'll touch on that. The first part was about while it would be nice to get back at the Russians and try and retake land from them that they've managed to take through proxy wars and annexations, it wouldn't be a good idea because you know, the war would drag on forever, and there would be many more victims on the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, and it just wouldn't be a good thing in terms of the human cost. So that's what we can get from his initial part of the speech. The latter part of the speech is talking about the importance of how the Eastern Front will go. And what he was saying in that part of the speech, which we're going to close this out because a lot of y'all are saying that the audio isn't really high. And I'm sorry, I don't really know how I can fix that right now. So we're actually going to just move on to explain what he was talking about at the end of his speech. And that's that he is talking about Mariupol, which is a city that's been besieged for an incredibly long time, about 43 days at this point, which is an incredibly long siege by modern standards. He's saying that Mariupol is a critical and vital area of defense for the Ukrainians in the Eastern Front, and that city must hold. And this is a little bit different than what I'm saying, but maybe he has some information to suggest otherwise. But he's saying that the city must hold, and if it can, this gives the Ukrainians a very important and vital position in their peace talks with the Russians. This is suggesting that during this entire time when I said the Ukrainians may have made Mariupol a write-off in a way and just consigned that it will be lost eventually, that may not be the case, and they may in fact, with that kind of talk, be looking at some kind of breakthrough that will hopefully reconnect Mariupol to the rest of the front lines, and also, most importantly, to a supply line, so that way they can make sure that the defenders are well equipped. That would be the most important thing that the Ukrainians could do. So we'll just have to wait and see how that situation unfolds. Hopefully something can be done in towards the effect of helping out Mariupol, but of course we're not entirely sure what the Ukrainian plans are, so we'll just have to wait in the coming days and see if that is the case. If it is the case, I hope so, and I hope that the defenders of Mariupol are able to get out of there without having to die or surrender, and they can actually be awarded by Zelensky himself, and they will all be hopefully alive. We're now going to move on to the last bit of news in the Kyiv area today, where we can see a miraculous surgery. Now, this is nothing short of a miracle here, but we can see this miraculous surgery succeed. This soldier here was shot in the heart. Now, getting shot in the heart is usually death. You know, much like getting shot in the head, most of the times will kill you. In this one instance, though, an incredible Belarusian doctor who is in Ukraine performed an amazing surgery, something that probably only the best doctors in the world can do, and he was able to extract the bullet from this man's heart, and he was able to live, and the surgery was a success at the moment. Now, this is a feat of medical surgery, and I have to say, I got to give a lot of credit to that doctor who did such an incredible job with the surgery. There's the bullet that was extracted. That's impressive, and I have to say, that man will have an incredibly good medical career considering he pulled off something that is nearly impossible. What a guy. I got to give a lot of support to the doctor who did that. So we're now going to move on out of the Kyiv area, and we're going to move to the location unknowns. The first bit of news that we've gotten today is that an X-29 destroys an outhouse. They also clipped in a picture in amongst these pictures of an X-29. They deleted it. Well, anyways, it was a massive crater, and the X-29 had literally destroyed an outhouse. I was hoping that I could go through these pictures because no one was killed in the event of this explosion, and I was going to make a joke saying that that if it was an infrared missile that locked on to heat signatures, then there must have been some hot shit in that outhouse. But sadly, I can't make that joke due to that being removed. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians destroy a Russian column. Not really sure if it was abandoned or not. It was sitting stationary, and we didn't see any crew or any movement of infantry around this column, so we're not sure if it was abandoned, but nonetheless, this is Russian equipment that the Russians will never be able to get back. And so here's the video. As you can see, there's a T-72B3, and the reason why I'm saying they're abandoned is because on top of not seeing crew, you can also see that all the hatches on these tanks are open, which suggests that the crew has bailed. Nonetheless, the equipment loss is huge because these tanks cost a couple of $1 million a pop, around 3.2 million US dollars. And I'm not exactly sure as to the cost of the BTR-82s, but I would assume that they're much cheaper than a T-72B3. Nonetheless, it's still equipment lost, and it's something that the Ukrainians can put under their belt as a trophy. As you can see, the artillery is raining all around this column. It's getting a little bit closer and closer each time. We can see that they had already destroyed a BTR-82, and the fire is just getting a little bit closer each time. Now it's a little bit far back. Now it's getting farther back. And now finally, it looks like one of them hit the side of this BTR-82. Hopefully that'll make it brew up here in a second. Doesn't look like it. Now we can see another explosion landing close to that T-72B3. We can now once again see more explosions. The Ukrainians are trying to get lucky with these artillery hits and hopefully start hitting these vehicles dead on. Now we can see that they've hit the other T-72B3 with a direct hit, which has, of course, destroyed the tank nearly entirely. I'm sure once it brews up, it will be completely destroyed. Now we can see the other T-72B3 appears to have been hit, as well as the other BTR-82. And so we've seen all three BTR-82s and both T-72B3s get entirely destroyed by Ukrainian artillery. They may have been abandoned, but still, that is equipment that the Russians will never have the chance of recovering. Speaking of interesting things that have happened today, we've seen a Starstreak manpad in use by the Ukrainians today. This is a Starstreak manpad, by the way. But anyways, here's the video. Also, I'm going to rewind this real quick so that way y'all can get a really good look at it from start to finish. So as we can see, the Starstreak was launched. And let's go back and see the moment of victory if we can. I couldn't really see it, and that's why I want to go back. I can't see it. But I'm assuming from their reaction, they definitely hit something.
Yes!
Because that is pure celebration right there. That's raw emotion.
Леше, Леше, я Карпаты, есть контакт, уничтожили пидора.
And so, very neat video. Once again, we can see Starstreaks being used to incredibly good links. We already saw an Mi-28 get shot down by a Starstreak a while ago. We didn't see the manpad fire the Starstreak, and we're not even sure if it was a manpad. It could have been another system that uses the Starstreak, you know, how would I say it? We're going to call it the Starstreak missile. But I'm not entirely sure, but once again, we do know that already in Mi-28, one of Russia's best helicopters was already destroyed by a Starstreak, and so now we can see that they're being used to great effect around the entirety of the country, and it is very neat to see such an interesting weapon that the British have developed being used across the entirety of Ukraine now. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russians, and this kind of gives you an idea of how the Russians are viewing this war as a whole, because I know that a lot of people are saying, well, a decent amount of Russians don't support the war. But as the war goes on, I'm seeing that as a harder and harder thing to back up, because because the Russians could be saying a lot of Ukrainians want Russia to be in Ukraine, but at the same time over here we see a lot of Ukrainians that don't want the Russians in Ukraine, and that is the case. But as you can see in this video, you can see a whole bunch of Russians clapping and waving goodbye to Russian units that are being sent into Ukraine. So here's that video. You can see them waving. Look at this guy. He's got a little sweatshirt on that says CCCP, which is the Russian spelling, I guess you could say, of the USSR. So no, we got a little commie right here. But anyways, the video goes on. See the Russians you can see the Russians waving to the civilians as they're about to go and start looting houses and killing civilians indiscriminately, most likely. Now you can see a support vehicle. You can see another support vehicle. One with a train horn. One towing another one. What is this? A Dr. Seuss book? Anyways. Also, that guy was like driving like it was some kind of rally in Wales or something. Look at this guy around this curve. Golly. You guy's gonna kill someone before he gets out of Russia. Also that one. Man, these guys are taking the corner really fast. I think it's maybe because they're starting to lag behind their convoy. But still, it's super interesting to see that a lot of Russians actually do support this war. And I would say that that's probably the case. Usually you support your country whenever you go into a war, regardless whether it's right or not. The majority of people will. These people may be blinded by Russian propaganda, because we know that Russian propaganda programs and campaigns in Russia have been extremely fierce, to the point that we see them constantly inside of malls and public areas trying to make sure that public opinion stays in support of this war, regardless of how it's actually going and regardless of the news they're able to receive about it. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see another interesting site where the Ukrainians have repurposed a Tiger. So check this video out. Very neat. They painted the Ukrainian flag on it. And also, the caption here said that it was from the Kadrovites, but I'm not entirely sure, so I just put it down as a captured Tiger, because there's no information to say this is Mariupol. It doesn't look like Mariupol. Maybe these were the Kadrovites near the Bucha Hostomel Irpin area, but I'm not entirely sure, and we don't really have enough info to back that up from what we can see on the vehicle. So that's why, once again, I'm saying it's just the captured Tiger, and I'm not saying it's a captured Kadrovite vehicle.
Привет передай, Миша.
Very, very nice vehicle the Tiger is, at least in appearance. I'd have to say it is a pretty neat looking armored car. Once again, neat isn't really the perfect way to pick out military vehicles or weapons or anything. You want to pick them off of efficiency, but what am I going to do? Talk about the miles per gallon that this thing has or something like that? It's neat looking. It's good to know that the Ukrainians have gotten another one, and hopefully from the Kadrovites, because that'd be funny if they got it from the TikTok army itself. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian doctor treating a Russian POW. So I'm going to let y'all see this video real quick. Looks like he's being treated inside of some kind of hospital or clinic. Let me put that up to full volume and rewind it to the start. As you can see here, she appears to be bandaging his leg, which may have suffered some kind of cut.
Потому что сказали, что...
А что вам говорят?
Нам ничего не говорили. У нас не радиостанции.
And so that's the end of that video. Of course, it's just a doctor applying bandages to some kind of wound on his leg. I'm not really exactly sure what kind, but I'm assuming it's most likely some kind of cut, laceration, or something along those lines. Before we move on, I'm actually interested because it's about 30 minutes into the stream, and I'm wondering, how well have we done? So, real quick, Matthew, what is it looking like as far as the donations?
So we are currently sitting at just at 5.3 thousand raised for the Mercy Corps.
Really?
Yes,
30 minutes in?
that's right.
Oh my gosh. Good lord, who are, like, let's recognize some people. Who are the people who've been sending in the huge amounts of support?
So at $500 donation, we have Mikhail Carlson, Politics as Unusual, the biggest donation of the night. Second up, we have a $200 donation from Thomas Summer, and then we have several $100 donations. We have one from DC90, we have one from William Allen, Caffeine, BC Skyman, AZ, Zwan Tran, James Menard, and so far those are the biggest donations of the night.
Good lord. I thank you all so much. I'm glad, once again, that we can all gather around and give this kind of support to Ukraine. It means a lot to them, and it means a lot to us as a channel and a community in a way, because over the course of a month and a half now, this has gone from a channel to really a community in a way. And I mean it when I say I'm so proud that we can all call ourselves a community and a channel. Y'all do so much help and so much good, and y'all are just people with hearts of gold. And I thank y'all all so much, because this kind of help is something that Ukraine always needs, and we are always trying to provide as much as we possibly can as a whole. And I've got to say, I want to thank all of y'all like DC90, Caffeine, and William Allen, because y'all have been here before and y'all been supporting the channel, and I think it's as important, if not much more important, to support Ukraine as well. And I've got to say, I thank y'all so much, because y'all come here and y'all step up to the plate every single time a fundraiser comes around, and y'all help out as much as you can, and it means a lot to me. And I'm so glad that that is the case, that we're still able to raise huge amounts of support and help for Ukraine. One other thing I'd like to say is that I will, of course, be checking in randomly on how well the donations are doing, because, you know, I'm very interested in this, and this also is the fundraiser night, so we are wanting to make sure that we are recognizing everyone who's doing huge amounts of help for Ukraine and helping them go that much further in this war, and not having to worry about taking care of as many citizens as they have that are in terrible situations right now, and that we, as a people, can step forward and help out the Ukrainians in winning this war by freeing up a lot of their resources as well. So I thank you all so much again. It means a lot to me. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian going for a Sunday stroll. His Sunday stroll seems to have been uninterrupted, but nonetheless, it looks like he is driving through an active war zone in a way here and there, but nonetheless, it's kind of a relaxing drive. So I'm going to let y'all see it. So you can hear a little bit of shooting. So he's gonna stop for a minute. I mean, this guy. I watched a lot of this video because I was like, huh, this guy drives like it's like a Disney ride, like it's Wild Country Safari or something. He stops every once in a while in the middle of a firefight, and it's like if he had a narrator in his car, he'd be like, "And so over to the right side, there's currently a firefighting going on in between the Ukrainians and the Russians on the other side of that berm. Let's see how it goes." And it's like, I gotta say, it's actually pretty brave for him to be driving down this highway with all these firefights going on, because as you'll see, this isn't the only one here. There's actually another one that's actually somewhat sizable looking, and yet he keeps on driving, and he in fact drives in between the units. It's very odd, but nonetheless, this man is going out for his Sunday stroll. You see, he's now moving on. You can see a BMP right there. Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Correction. Yes, a BMP-1. We can also see a BDRM over there. And we see more armored vehicles as the road goes on. Now we can see this here. And what's so odd to me, this is a BMP-1 as well. And you've got Ukrainian soldiers hiding behind the tanks. Well, not the tank. The APC is a more accurate term. And they're literally in the middle of a firefight. So I gotta say that that's really interesting nonetheless, that this guy is literally just driving through the middle of an active war zone. That's really something. So anyways, we're going to continue on with the video. So now he's continuing on. I gotta say, I know this is a very harrowing situation for this guy, and he's probably really stressed out. But it's hilarious to me that he's literally driving through a war, and he's just doing it. This is something. This takes a lot of bravery. I mean, like, that's really all you can say is that I don't know where he's going, like what his goal is. Maybe he's trying to escape the area. But he's a really brave guy for undergoing such a journey as to actually drive through the middle of units that are actively fighting the Russians not too far off the road, probably just 100 yards or 200 yards away. Well, really, the average firefight occurs around 300 yards, but nonetheless, I bet y'all get the picture. So I'm going to let the video continue. And so he's following the truck. It looks like they've kind of gotten out of a firefight for a bit now, and they're just having a little bit more smooth sailing down the road, however smooth being in the middle of a war zone can be. But what bravery! I mean, like, I gotta say this again, I know it's like a broken record now, but what bravery this guy has to actually face down such a thing and just go with it. Now he's speeding. No one's gonna pull him over, though. You know, it's a war zone. Who's gonna care? Ooh! Oh man, that looks rough. There's BMP parts. Well, just general tank parts, really, all over the road. Hopefully that didn't slash his oil pan under the car, that piece that he ran over. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of film, because there's not much to say about that. That was just pure suspenseful, but kind of a little comical at the same time, how this guy, you didn't hear him talk at all because that was a dash cam and you can hear people talking. He's just sitting in there quietly driving his car through a war zone. I'm glad he made it out alive. Hopefully he was making his way out of the area, so considering that he's not in a TDF for the Ukrainian army. And so I do hope that he is as safe as he can be, and hopefully reuniting with his family somewhere in western Ukraine, if that is where he's heading, or where she is heading. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news that's location unknown, and it's a little bit of a sad bit of news. It's a dog waiting for their owner, but the sad news is that their owner has died and will never return, but the dog diligently waits for them to come back. I include dogs a decent bit on this stream, and I know that dogs are just dogs, but dogs and people, since the beginning of time, kind of a little bit of a historical background, have had a very special relation in most parts of the world, in between kind of, really men and dogs. It's kind of a thing that's been going on forever. And so it's just so sad to see these relationships, because when dogs die, people bawl their eyes out, and when people die, dogs grieve in a way that's very sad, because they just sit there and they just don't accept that their owner is no longer alive, and I just hate that. Anyways, here's the video. I'm gonna let y'all see this because this is just incredibly unfortunate.
нас ждет. Хозяйки нет.
As you can see, the dog sitting up there on the perch at the doorway.
Она возвращается опять домой. Даже
Don't you feel
чувствует,
sorry for
что
that
её
poor
ждут.
dog? Because I do.
Ребята, пожалуйста, кто-нибудь заберите собаку к себе домой. Она очень добрая, старая.
Look at that poor thing.
Ренни, старушка. Ты
And it's so
хорошая,
old.
очень-очень добрая. Ренюшечка, Ренюшечка. Рене 9 лет. Она, конечно, лучше выглядела 2 месяца назад. Но жила на улице, ее никто не кормил. Хозяйку взяли в плен. Ну, больше у нее никого не осталось. Потушка, потушка.
I hate that. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian soldier treating a Russian soldier. We've actually seen two separate instances over today of Ukrainian soldiers taking the time, well, Ukrainian soldiers and doctors taking the time to treat injured Russian soldiers that have been captured over the course of this war. And it does show, because a lot of people have been asking me to review footage of Ukrainians supposedly shooting Russians in the knees and also executing prisoners on the field. And I have to be honest that they seem somewhat convincing in a way. They look authentic. And it's very hard to make that kind of gasping sound in that one video that one guy was shot in the chest. And he had like that, had that kind of like sound when people breathe of like a deep sucking wound. And if you ever watched other videos where someone has been shot or something like that, it sounds just like that, because blood's filling their lungs and they're trying to suck in air, and it makes this very specific sound, and it's very hard to imitate that kind of sound through acting. So I have to say that I think those were real, sadly. I hate to think that, but a war has a lot of gray area in it, and things like that unfortunately happen. Hopefully the Ukrainians who did that will be reprimanded, because that kind of stuff, like I've explained historically that when there's no ability or chance to be able to take prisoners and actually take care of them, executions do happen. That's kind of a gray area, because really at that point, those prisoners will either die from starvation under some kind of control by those forces, or they're going to get shot or something. It's a very gray area there. But to do something like that when it looks like they do in fact have the ability to take care of them is wrong, regardless how you look at it. So with that, it looks like there's a bit of good and bad happening, because we can see that while we have seen a very small amount of instances of Ukrainians doing not so savory things, we can still see that they do hold some humanity in them, and they are taking care of their foes even when they've been fighting against them for some while. So here's the video of the Ukrainian soldier treating this Russian.
Откуда?
So with that, we're now going to move on to the next video. It's really a self-explanatory video. It's just an injured Russian soldier, and this Ukrainian is treating him. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see starving Ukrainian kids getting some food after they've been liberated. Hopefully this link works, because I had a little bit of a error. But nonetheless, Here's the video.
Ти Лопаша була? А я ночі там. Налякав жорстко. Одійшов десь. Сказав, що ви ще не будете, швидко ушов.
These kids are holding this food like it's the most precious thing. And I gotta say, especially when you've been starving, food's incredible. So it's good to know that they're finally getting some good food after their village has been liberated once again from the Russians. We know that the Russians were having incredibly hard times supplying their own army with parts, food, ammunition, and so on. So you know for sure that the civilians were also suffering under that same kind of pressure, and probably much worse, because the Russians are going to prioritize the military over civilians in captured territory. So I'm so happy to see that these kids are finally getting some good food.
Батьки ваші. Хоч вмити рани ці. Це щека вже повна. Чекай, зайка.
Слава Україні!
Слава Україні!
Вам слава! Та воно не щито, все так добре.
Руки, покажи.
Hey, wait a minute. What was that? Hang on, let me go back. Did you see that? Is that Swiss? That can't be a Red Cross. I know that isn't. Let me pull that up. Swiss patch. Swiss patch. Is that a Swiss volunteer? I'm telling you, that looks a lot like a Swiss patch right there. But let's pull up a Red Cross patch, because I don't think a Ukrainian would be, or Ukrainian with a Ukrainian flag would be wearing a Red Cross patch. As you can see, that on a Swiss patch, the cross is white, but on a Red Cross patch, obviously as the name suggests, the cross is red. So it looks like this is an incredibly rare Swiss volunteer. If you know anything historically about the Swiss were actually known throughout most of their history for being some of the finest mercenaries that you could get in Europe. As time went on, that started to fade, and in fact, the Swiss have now banned the practice of mercenaries a long time ago, the only exception being the Pontifical Swiss Guard. But still, it's very interesting to see that there is a Swiss volunteer out there somewhere delivering aid and food to these kids. Very interesting indeed. So anyways, that's the end of that video. It's wonderful to see that the Ukrainians are making sure to pick up the slack where they left off when the Russians pushed them out of that area, and they're now going back and taking care of their people. And they have the ability to, which is an incredible thing. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a captured Sturm. We saw one of these in operation the other day, and now we can see one of them being towed away by a Ukrainian farmer for the harvest, well, the planting season. Hopefully it'll be in use by the harvest season, because that little arm on the back could probably be used for something. But anyways, here's the video of them dragging away the Sturm. Very nice video to see. We've seen a whole bunch of captured vehicles over the course of this war, so nothing's really new to us in terms of captures, but still, it's really cool to see them capturing Russian armored vehicles, just as civilians with tractors, trucks, and so on. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians once again using more trophy vehicles. It seems like they've now been able to repair these vehicles if they were damaged, and they're now starting to use captured vehicles in very large numbers, mostly because these vehicles are compatible with their current stores of ammunition and parts, which is very good, especially considering that simplifies their supply lines a large deal. So you can see here that they are using a T-72B3 on the front lines. see, the tank is now sitting there, really doing, well, of course, doing nothing right now. It's reloading, most likely. As you see, it's firing downrange. It's something we can't particularly tell what it is. But the purpose of this video isn't to show the damage they're inflicting on the Russians, if any, is to show that they are using capture vehicles. Which is once again, because I'm going to cut off this video, it's just them looking into the distance for a while. It is once again incredible to know that the Ukrainians have captured so many vehicles that now video instances of Russian armor now being Ukrainian armor actually outweighs the video evidence we've gotten of Ukrainian armor, original Ukrainian armor, being used on the front. That tells you a lot about how many Russian tanks have been captured by the Ukrainians over the duration of this war. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a captured Raza armored car. These are brand new, apparently a little bit newer than the Tiger, or maybe a better version of an armored car. This one's starting to look like it's entering the MRAP region in how its armor is laid out instead of just the simple beefed up armored car. But nonetheless, I'm going to let y'all see this because this is kind of like a, what's the name? Hey, Matthew, what's the name of that guy? Demi DeMuro?
Doug DeMuro?
Doug DeMuro, yeah, this is like a Doug DeMuro of the car world, but instead of doing cars, they're doing armored cars. So here's the video.
Друзья, покажу вам укропский трофейчик. Броневичок, смотрите. Это они на нем решили покорить народ Донбасса. Вот смотрите, друзья, укропский.
So you see that the inside of this vehicle is pretty nice.
Тут все у них.
And it's in fairly good condition, actually. I'm pretty happy to see that.
Вот такой. Бойница, да?
It's nice to see that the back row, of course, well, the second row of seats has some legroom. That's always very important when considering a new or pre-owned vehicle. And it looks like if you have a family, you'll of course be able to fit them in the back. But where this vehicle truly shines is in the trunk. So let's go and take a look at the trunk of this car and see what it can do. Well, goodness gracious, look at the trunk space in that thing. Now, if you had a whole bunch of blocks of cheese, and if y'all watch Top Gear, y'all know where I'm getting this joke from, you could fit hundreds of pounds of block cheese in that thing. Also, it looks like you have a whole bunch of room if you're taking a party out for dinner, because it looks like you actually have a whole bunch of fold-down seats here in the back that you can use as well. Once again, an incredibly good find. We don't know the asking price for this vehicle, but I can assume that something as luxurious as this, even with portholes. So if you happen to be on a bender and you have a whole bunch of drunk guests in the back of your car, they can stick their mouths to those holes and throw up out the side. Now that is an interesting quirk and feature that I have not seen on most modern cars, and I think that should start being implemented across most SUVs, really. Anyways, let's take a better look at the back of this car.
Блин, все-таки плохо быть великаном, блин. Там еще, видите, этот, как башня, как крутится.
Just look at it. Wait a minute, did it have a sunroof?
Там еще, видите, этот,
Let's take a look at that again.
как башня, как крутится.
Look at that. It's got a sunroof. Now, a lot of SUVs only have the sunroofs that go to like the second row seats, but this one's got it all the way in the trunk. Now, you gotta say, that's some class right there. Anyways, we're gonna let the video continue.
Да, товарищ командир?
Now, I just want to see if the other side of this trunk is identical, because right now it's looking kind of impressive. And if the other side looks the same, then I am sold. Ah, he's not going to go to the other side. Okay, now it looks like he's going back up the side, the other side of the Kazan, I believe is the name of it. Yes, Kozan. Look, I mean, like, it doesn't have cup holders, okay? It doesn't have that going for it, but it does have a massive armrest right there in the middle. Now, if you're like one who leans in really far, I think that'll be a very useful armrest. Rather than that, don't really see a lot of use for it. But also, look at the intricate and beautiful detail that went into the sunroof here. It's perfectly circular. Unfortunately, it doesn't encompass the front row of seats where the driver and front passenger sit, but nonetheless, that is an impressive sunroof. And on top of that, it seems like, honestly, I mean, I'm not really sure if the car is made for this, but you could probably stand on this armrest here in the center and probably stand out the top. And now, if you're a real big reveler and a partier, you know, and you got all the drunk people in the back throwing up out of the holes on the side of the vehicle, you could have a really drunk guy flailing his arms about on top of the vehicle as you drive through town, and he would still look smarter than the average Russian soldier. So, let's let the video continue.
Ну туда вылази из пулемета мотоботы делаешь.
Now, I would like to note that there is some chipping in the paint on this here handrail, and I believe that the price is a little, does have a little bit of flexibility and wiggle room. But then again, I'd like to see the monthly payments on this thing, just so that way I can see if it is encompassed within the normal budget.
Называется он Коза. Броневик Коза.
And it appears that Kozak actually makes an interesting vehicle that you can get with a Javelin or a Stugna. Although it may require some assembly afterwards.
Нет, сними на память. Я потом, если что, выдерну фотку.
But it looks like Kozak has another happy customer with this man right here. I think he's going to put a decent amount of miles on that, and I think all of his friends around the corporate office will be very pleased with his upgraded Hummer. So, with that, we're now going to move on to the next location unknown. I hope y'all enjoyed that little foray into a little bit of silliness, because I thought that was actually kind of a little bit funny to review it like a car, like how that guy was doing. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the famous Belarusian mustache man using a captured gun. So here's the video. The mustache man is right here in the video. So here it is.
Русский! Парня, выходи! Выходи, пацан!
Mustache man's supernatural senses have been alerted to something on the right side of the road. And the video sadly ended. We couldn't actually see who did what, but that's really unfortunate. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Georgian volunteers enjoying some free time, and unfortunately they don't have the luxurious Kazakh that we just saw a second ago, but it looks like they may have a Tiger or some other kind of car, which is, it's okay, but I think it's in vogue right now to get the Kazakh. Anyways, let's check them out partying in their car. Actually, this looks more like a bus, honestly. Which is good. I mean, like, party buses are pretty common. This guy's dancing skills are impressive. Look at this guy. He is getting with it. Impressive. While, unfortunately, they don't have the most recent and finest Kazakh, they do have a party bus, which I guess means something. We're now going to move on to the final bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians conduct an Orlan drone unboxing video. The Russians, once again, have offered them some free gifts, and they're not one to turn it down. And so, let's check out this unboxing.
Чином впали на нашу землю, були нами трепановані, і ми навіть хотіли
It looks like they're talking about bringing the gift even farther, as they're talking about sending this to their Western partners, and hopefully that means the United States of America. Anyways, I'm going to let the video continue.
Пару фотографій, вони сказали, бляха, це не може виглядати як щось сучасне, ви нас, мабуть, найобуєте, розбирайтесь з цим самі. Чим ми і займаємось. І зараз ми побачимо деякі суперсучасні технічні.
So apparently, right after offering to send this to their Western friends said this thing is backwards as hell and we're not going to take a look at it. So then the Ukrainians decided that they were going to take a look at it for themselves. So let's see what they found.
Побачимо скрепи духовні, близькі кожному росіянину, які застосовуються в БПЛА «Орлан». От. Ну і, можливо, піддивимось деякі технічні рішення, які ми можемо використовувати у цих кружках шкільних по створенню всяких аеропланів. І так, оце блок зйомки камер.
So now we can see him talking about the camera unit.
Фіксує позиції наших військ. Made in Russia типу, але насправді це тупо фотоапарат Canon, який є великий.
Look, it's a normal camera. Look at that.
Приліплений сюди в Орлан. Його можна вийняти. Ще
Like we can pull that out and start filming videos like we were today.
використовувати, наприклад, для журналістики військової чи щось таке.
By the way, our camera is amazing. Like, that thing is 4K, so the graphics it picks up is incredible. And we actually went to a park today. I think I'm fine saying this because this doesn't give away anything in the video. But we went to a park in Huntsville, Alabama. So if you're around Huntsville, we were there today in the middle of the park in the center of downtown. And I've got to say, that city is nuts. They've got a koi pond down there that is like 5 acres large, and it's in the center of downtown, and it's got nothing but these old massive koi in it. It is impressive. I don't know how much it costs to maintain that pond, but you know it's expensive. Anyways, here's the rest of this video.
Бачите, клеєм вони заклеїли цю крутилку, аби раптом в польоті фотоапарат не вимкнувся. Ну, таке, мабуть, в них теж буває. Зафіксували зум і так далі, і полетіли. Ну, тут ще є модулі тепловізійні. От. Багато тут ще цікавих моментів, на які я не хочу зараз витрачати час. І перейдемо до самого головного, до тих самих духовних скреп, без яких не може існувати жодна російська сучасна технологія. Без бутилки або пляшки по-нашому. Це серйозно, це не фейк. Отут написано топливо, зажигання, а отут ви бачите просто кришечку від пластикової пляшки.
Oh my gosh, look. It's like a Dasani water bottle, like a little cap holder thing where you swivel the cap onto it and it, closes the bottle. And they've got a little, oh my lord. This is backwards. Like this is like some Kerbal Space Program levels of manufacturing here.
Відрізали з якоїсь бутилочки, я так розумію, може з-під мінеральної води, вклепали сюди в корпус і використовується все це, як бачите, десь ось так. Коротше, без бутилки Росія не Росія.
Anyways, as you can see, this Orlan drone is produced in some kind of sweatshop or something because it is using every single cutting of a corner that it can. That's pitiful. We're now going to move on from the location unknowns. We've been here for a little bit. There's been a lot of them today. And we're now going to start moving on down towards the Kharkiv and the Donbass area. But before we do, we're going to answer 3 to 5 questions from the chat, and we're also going to see how well has the fundraiser gone. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
So we are currently sitting at just at $9.5 thousand. We are only $500 away from meeting our $10,000 goal. So everybody's doing extremely great. Thank you so much. That is very, very close to meeting our goal. All we need is $500 more. Maybe somebody can come in clutch and put in a $500 donation, and we can go ahead and wrap up our donations for the night. But I do want to recognize 2 very large donations. We have another $500 donation from Rich Hogan. Extremely crazy amount to put for a donation, and we thank you very much, Rich Hogan, for that.
That is Rich
and next
Hogan.
up, we have a $100. Yes, for sure. And next up, we have a $100 donation from Sice SP, and that is the only 2 that I saw. If I've missed you, just know that we will see it in the chat. I would like to give you your credit. So if I've missed you, just feel free to put it in the chat and I will call your name out.
Here's my question, y'all. Can we reach 10,000 before I get to the end of this question segment? Can the Leaf Spring Army pull together and win a strategic battle in the next few minutes for us to achieve our goal of this week, which is another $10,000 in aid to Ukraine? Just to let y'all know, if we're... Oh, wait a minute, we just reached it.
Oh,
We
10,000.
reached it. We did it. We did it. Okay, we've reached 10,000. We've reached the goal. I was just about to explain to y'all, if we reach that, that means that we have raised $100,000 on this channel in support for Ukraine. So I would like to give that anonymous person a huge round of applause, and everyone needs to give them a load of support. We have just passed the $100,000 mark. Now, if that isn't something to celebrate, I don't know what is. I thank y'all so much. I've done... like this channel and all of us, and I can't believe it. Like, I don't even know what to say. We've just passed $100,000 in total since the beginning of this war in donations and support for Ukraine. And I've got to say, I thank y'all so much. This is incredible. I thank y'all once again. I mean, like, this is huge. And with that, I'm not gonna harp on that too long. I'm just gonna carry over that energy into the stream. And so with that, what type of questions do we got?
Okay, so first up, we have a question from Ben Lampron, who says, Enforcer, if Russia issues a general mobilization, what do you foresee the NATO response to be, as the Ukrainian army will struggle competing with that kinds of manpower and reserve?
Here's the thing. I don't think that's going to happen. I've kind of talked about that a bit. While the Russian army is around 730,000 large, they only have 4,000 supply vehicles for that entire army, at least in their logistics units. And going off of that, and we've seen this to hold true, is that they've been using pretty much all of their logistical forces in this war during its entirety, and they haven't really been able to manage using them effectively. Even with the amount of trucks they have, which was 4,000 initially, they were only able to supply around 62% of their army at maximum efficiency that was actually inside of Ukraine. So out of the 220,000 soldiers they had committed to this war, they can only supply 62% of them. And so throwing in more soldiers would only lead to more logistical issues. And that would lead to things that, like we saw in Kyiv with the 40-mile long convoy, literally collapsing an entire front line. So I don't really think that NATO would do anything. Of course, if those units were actually supplied once they enter the field, they will push the Ukrainians back a good bit. But then they're going to stall. And like the 40-mile long convoy, it didn't even get to the front and do anything meaningful. It stalled behind the lines and then managed to soak up a load of supplies just to move it a little bit afterwards and move most of it out of the country again. So I don't really think that a general mobilization would actually mean anything in the long term from what we've seen so far. But then again, take that with a grain of salt. That's just based off of my knowledge and what we've seen so far, but that may actually be wrong in this instance. So take that for what you will, but I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a comment from Vicious Tuna, who says, Enforcer, have you guys heard about the Chinese anti-aircraft system arriving in Serbia? Do we need to worry about the Balkans too, and Slava Ukraine?
I don't think we need to worry about the Balkans. Primarily because the Russians would have a very hard time getting there because they'd have to now fly over NATO airspace, which I don't believe was the case during the 90s when the whole entire Yugo thing was going on. So I don't think we need to worry about the Balkans in particular. That's just going to be its own little thing. And Serbia, I have a feeling, is not going to do anything because Serbia isn't a direct ally to Russia as far as I know. They're very strong friends, but I feel like the Serbians will just get jumped, and I think they actually know that in a way because I think most of their neighbors are actually NATO allies, so they might want to be careful with that. And also, could you get that first part of the question for me again, Matthew? Because I don't think I addressed that one well enough.
So he says, have you guys heard about the Chinese anti-aircraft system arriving in Serbia?
Oh, yes, I did. That's actually the news that we have to cover in Serbia today. So I thank you very much for that question. I hope I've answered it a pretty good deal. And we will, and stick around because we will get to that news at the end of the stream. That will be with the Pakistani news as well. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Ben Crowder, who says, can Putin hold on to power if he can't take the East?
That's a good question. I think he will. Honestly, from my assessments, we haven't seen his power come under threat, even with the war going terribly up till this point, which is a month and a half now. The economy has been destroyed, among a whole bunch of other things, and we just haven't seen anything happen really that actually shows that Putin's power is in danger. So I don't actually think if he lost completely and he just had to sign a peace where things return to status quo antebellum, I don't actually think that would actually threaten his leadership. But then again, that's my opinion. Take that with a grain of salt. I might be entirely wrong. They might be planning a coup right now, but I don't really know, and that's kind of my assessment of the situation. And so with that, we're going to go for one more question from this question segment, and then we're going to move on to the news in Kharkiv. Yeah, I'm sorry, I got confused there. We're going to move on to the news in Kharkiv. So with that, what is the last question?
So the last question of the segment goes to Frank Schifrin, who says, Enforcer, why does it seem that Ukraine is waging a mostly defensive war, and does it not seem to be taking proactive attacks?
Well, we have seen them taking proactive attacks. If you're asking why they're not pushing back into Russia, the reason why is because it's a defensive war, and they're not really trying to look to destroy the Russians. They're really just looking at trying to defend their land. On top of that, they always have to be very careful about the resource usage, because while they are doing incredibly well, they are a very small country with a population about a quarter of the size of the Russians, and a GDP that is much smaller, along with a smaller military budget. A decent amount of their military supplies right now rely on foreign aid, as well as their own stores that they built up over many years. And so, in terms of resources, they have to be incredibly careful how they use them. So that may be the reason why you're not seeing them commit to offensives, is because offensive action takes much more in the resource department than defensive action. But then again, that is not entirely the case, because we did see them commit to large offensives across the entirety of the country about 2 weeks ago. So I hope I've answered that question pretty well. And with that, we've reached the end of this question segment, and we're now going to cover the Donbass and Kharkiv, excluding Mariupol, which will be in the next segment. So with that, we're now moving on to the pictures, well, actually the video today that we got of the Russians in the Kharkiv region. So here's that video. I'm just going to let y'all watch. As you can see, there's a Sturm. We saw one of those being hauled off a minute ago. We see a T-72B3 most likely firing into the distance. Now we can see it firing again. And so that's the end of the video. It's simply just Russian vehicles in action near the Kharkiv area. We know, of course, that at this point, the Russians aren't even on the ring road of Kharkiv anymore, but I haven't been able to change the front line because I haven't gotten video evidence showing that they've been pushed back further. So that front line is not accurate at the moment, but we don't know by how much, so it's not being adjusted. So with that, we're now going to move on towards the Izium area, where we can see the Russians strike a Ukrainian vehicle with a drone. The video is self-explanatory beyond that, so I'm just going to let y'all see the video. As you can see, the vehicle is right there. You can see the tracks leading up to it. And you see the drone is really just taking a good look for a bit. That's always creepy to me. Also, our drone is incredibly quiet, and it's very weird because when we fly it around, you can't hear it. Which I bet you, considering that this one is at a much higher altitude than ours can probably go, that it is silent. Like, no one can hear a noise. And no one can even hear noises from jets, really, commercial ones, at 30,000 feet. So, you know, that's just really creepy to think that at any moment in a modern war, a drone could be watching you for minutes on end, or maybe even hours. At times, they could rotate out drones and keep watching you for hours. But now we can see that the missile did come in and hit the vehicle, and it looks like it destroyed the vehicle along with the crew, which is incredibly unfortunate. And it's a terrible thing to see, but the good news is that this isn't really a common occurrence. We don't really see this a lot. And so hopefully this doesn't really do much in terms of hurting Ukrainians' defensive or offensive abilities in the course of this war. I do feel sorry for the Ukrainian soldiers because that explosion looked incredibly large, and I assume that it probably took them with it. And so that's very sad. I hope that they do get remembered for their service. And with that, the drone just surveys the damage for the rest of the video. So I'm going to end it there, and we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown. Well, not location unknown. Sorry, I get brainwashed saying that. But anyways, we're going to move to Severodonetsk, where we see Ukrainian tanker recount his daring fight with the Russians. We're going to actually cut this video a little bit short. I'm just going to show y'all the first part where he talks about his first confrontation and also read it out just in case y'all can't read it. And then we're going to move on to the next bits of news in the Donbass.
Донецьком під'їхати на Боровське. Там був у них опорник. Два танчика, 64-ка, обична БВшка, свіжо викрашений піксель. Свіжо викрашений піксель.
Нормально.
І 72-ка.
Под Северодонецком 64-ка и 70.
This man is saying that the Russians had a T-64 and a T-72 near Severodonetsk that he saw. And he's saying that their tanks were in an offensive and they were pushing the Russians.
Контратака була. Так.
І, виходить, вискочили ми по дорозі, як їхали. 64-ка стояла.
I think there was a typo there. It says T-62, but he said nothing about a T-62 before. He said it's T-64. So I'm thinking he's either talking about the T-64 or the T-72. Can't really tell, but he is talking about one of the tanks.
Мене научик дав йому осколочний в лоб.
He says that they hit the exact front of the tank with a shrapnel round and it took the tank out. Now he's saying that his tank apparently stalled for a second. And now he's saying that they started to destroy infantry fighting vehicles, probably like BTR-82s and BMPs.
Вона на вас вийшла?
Ні, вона одна стікала.
Now he's saying that he destroyed the T-72 that was there, which apparently was retreating because of the fast Ukrainian advance. Maybe was trying to move back to a defensive position where they were going to regroup, but it got destroyed in the process of moving there.
Трошки затупив їхній екіпаж. Ну, поки ми до них з поворота вискочили, вони вже були на розстоянні скільки? Кілометр, да? Кілометр чимось.
Тобто, спочатку одна ближче була.
Ну, це 64-ка, а то 72-ка. Скільки ми з нею? Та пів конвейера туди ушло.
Так, там пол конвейера ушло, тому що один снаряд туди,
Ну, живучі трохи оказались. 64-шники не так живучі були. 64-шний екіпаж, механік молодий, старший лейтенант з Біловодська, з України. І наводчик.
Huh, he gave a name of a town. Let's pull it up. Belovodsk. Belovodsk. Huh. He gave the name of a Ukrainian town. That looks like it's in the Luhansk region, but I don't think the Ukrainians, well, actually the Luhansk Republic actually had the ability to have that in their borders before the war. So I'm not really sure. Because it says Ukrainian man telling the details of fight with Russians. Let's pull up Ukrainian tanker uniform. Ukrainian tanker uniform. Because the one thing I'm thinking is that this guy may have been misidentified and he's actually a Russian prisoner. That's the Ukrainian tanker uniform, supposedly. It looks green. So let's pull up the Russian tanker uniform and see if it's blue. Russian tanker uniform. Not the World War II one, obviously. Ugh. You know, we're wanting the modern one. I don't really see any of them wearing blue, though, in the modern pictures. I can't really tell whose side this guy's on because they removed all of his patches.
Да. 172-ка довго перестрілювались. 3 осколка в лоб вони пережили. Ну, все ж згоріло. Як і полагається.
But anyways, I'm going to end the video there because I said I was going to cover the first part. We're going to assume that he is Ukrainian and that he destroyed a T-64, a T-72, and a couple of armored fighting vehicles, or APCs, armored personnel carriers, like BMPs or BTRs. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news further on down near the Luhansk area, but not generally in the Luhansk area. It was just somewhere in the Donbass, according to the description. But anyways, this video shows a Ukrainian shell landing directly on an APC in the Donbass. So you can see there, it looks like an empty LB, and you can see that the Ukrainian artillery hit it smack dab right on the center of the tank, wiping it out. A good video to see. Once again, the Ukrainians giving the Russians hell across most of the country, and it's good to know that it still is the case. So we're now going to move on from that to the next bit of news that we can see down around the Donetsk area, as we can see paratroopers on the Ukrainian side committing Stugna attacks in the Donetsk region. I'm not sure if the mention of them being paratroopers suggests that they have somehow made it behind the lines and these are some kind of partisan attacks conducted on their part, but nonetheless, here's the video.
Все. Выстрел.
You see they're firing the Stugna. The round is traveling towards the tank.
Уже пошли менять.
Погоди. Погоди.
And it's still traveling, and it hit the tank dead on.
Первый. Включай боевая. Пуск.
As you see, they're firing another Stugna. I'm not really sure if they rig up multiple Stugnas to the same launcher, like launch computer system, but now we can see it's traveling towards the other vehicle over there, and it's a dead-on hit.
Второй есть.
Once again, another vehicle destroyed. Now we can see them firing at another vehicle. Also, let me make sure to mute that because I just noticed that it had copyrighted music in it. I've been letting that play probably the entire time, but that's fine because I don't run ads on the videos anyway, so I don't think YouTube will get on to me. Anyways, the Stugna is on its way, and we can see that it hits this tank dead on as well, destroying it completely. And so we saw 3 tanks get destroyed in that one video by Ukrainian paratroopers. And we know that they didn't take any losses because that AT unit kept on operating and they kept on wiping out tanks. It was a good thing to see. It's good to know that the Ukrainian paratroopers are also giving the Russians a bloody nose in terms of armor losses. We're now going to move on to the area around Donetsk city, where we can see Ukraine destroying a munitions depot somewhere in the Donetsk Oblast. Anyways, here it is. Here is the video of the artillery going to work. As you can see, it is slamming the artillery depot and wiping out most likely all of the supplies that are within it. And that's the end of the video. Wonderful to see. We know that that's definitely going to hinder pro-Russian logistics even further, because we know that their logistics are still struggling for the large part, even in the southeastern area, with them probably regrouping their logistical structure and diverting the resources that they're using logistically in the north to the southeastern area, and it still sounds like they are struggling. So with that, we know that it's not going well. So with that, we're actually going to start moving on towards Mariupol, but before we do, we are going to recognize more supporters from our chat that have been helping out in the fundraiser tonight, and we are also going to be answering a few more questions as well, around 3 this time since this segment was covered so quickly. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so we are currently sitting somewhere around $10,400. We've had a lot of smaller donations coming in, so once again, we appreciate everybody putting in their part toward the donations. We very much appreciate it. Next up, our first question we have is from Cherry Patterson, who says, Enforcer, do you think Russia is going to do bad damage to Donbass? I hope somehow Ukraine can hold their city.
I think the Russians do have a couple of ways that they can maybe start to encircle Ukrainian units. As we can see here, there's starting to be a dangerous kind of pocket being created out of the Severodonetsk area, which may start to cause some trouble for the Ukrainians. We can also see a larger pocket that pocket is attached to that could be created from Izium to the area around Orlivka. So hopefully the Ukrainians can manage to hold on to that. If they do, their situation there will be good. But if they cannot, that means that thousands of soldiers could be encircled within these pockets. So hopefully they can hold their ground. I don't think the Russians are going to be able to rally to be able to launch any sort of successful offensive, because we've seen at the moment, even with them regrouping and removing themselves from the northern and eastern fronts nearly in their entirety, they still have not managed to make any impressive ground whatsoever in the southeast. That may just be because they're still reorganizing, but I would highly doubt that, honestly. Historically, this kind of lull time is a little bit too long, especially in a modern war, and considering that it's already lasted so long. So I think that the Russians will not be able to rally and launch any sort of successful offensives in this area. So I hope I answered the question pretty well, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quick, I want to recognize a $100 donation from Timothy Hardesty. Thank you very much, good sir, for that donation. And next up, we have a question from Samantha Ann, who says, Enforcer, thank you for everything you do and the mods too. How do you think this war compares to other wars in history in regards to war crimes?
I think in terms of war crimes, it's actually pretty on par with a whole lot of other wars. For example, World War II, the First World War. Um, but then again, it still has that Russian spin on it, where the war crimes are, of course, severe and always dehumanizing. For example, the war in Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989, the Chechen wars, and the invasion of Georgia. All of them have that specific Russian trademark imprint on them, where the Russians committed war crimes against the citizenry and killed large swaths of them and tortured them as well. So it does have that mark on it. And really, honestly, as far as the Russians conduct war, this is very standard for them. It's not anything new. It's not like they're stepping down to new levels of savagery for them. This is just how they do wars. Like in World War II, for example, it was known that when the Red Army rolled through anywhere, including parts of Russia, well, parts of the world that used to be in the Soviet Union, like Belarus in World War II, they went through raping everything that moved. And so it's not unheard of for them to commit terrible crimes like this. This is just kind of how the Russians have done war since the beginning of time. The United States has, of course, had their own share of war crimes in a way in World War I and World War II, like the Boscari massacre in Italy, to just name a large instance. But the Americans largely keep a greater handle on the crimes that are committed, and we also pretty much, well, we competently prosecute a much larger amount of our soldiers and keep them in line historically than Russia does. For example, in France, in World War II, I believe we executed some 27 men for charges of rape. And those weren't just random citizens; those were American soldiers that we had executed on charges of rape, and they were found guilty. So as far as war crimes, it's not too different. The thing is that the Russians never prosecute any of their soldiers for war crimes. Well, I would say much less. I know that they probably prosecute a few, we just don't hear of it. But they prosecute far less than their Western counterparts do, and they keep less order in that regard. So I hope that does answer the question in a way, at least with a historical context. And so with that, we're going to move on to our last question, and then we're going to move on to the Mariupol news, the news from the rest of the country, and then the international news as well. And then we're going to answer a few more questions after that and wrap up the stream for tonight. And so with that, what else do we have, Matthew?
And real quick, I want to recognize a $50 donation from longtime channel supporter Zelane. And also, we've had several other donations from several other people. Thank you all for your donations. I think we're going to hit at least 11,000 tonight, hopefully higher. Maybe we can hit 12,000. But nonetheless, the next question goes to Stray Cat 241, who says, Enforcer, if a war front is open in Poland, Do you think it would give Ukraine more leverage in negotiation?
If a new front was opened in Poland, I don't think anyone would be negotiating, because that war would go so south for the Russians so fast that nuclear onslaught would be inevitable at that point. So hopefully that never is the case, because that is a world-ending scenario right there. If there's ever a shot fired on the Polish border, mark my words, that will be the end of everything within weeks. It wouldn't be immediate, of course. It wouldn't be like one gunshot is heard and then everyone starts going for the nuclear footballs. It's going to be like one shot is heard, then thousands, then millions, then the West starts rolling through Russia at an unprecedented pace, just flooring everything in their path, and then you're going to start seeing nuclear missiles flying all over. So I don't think that would give them any leverage in the negotiations. If anything, that would make everything internationally much worse. So hopefully that does not happen. And with that, we've answered all the questions of this segment, and we're now going to move on to the news from around the rest of the map. Starting off in Mariupol, we've once again gotten more news today. It was much higher than yesterday. It was 6 pieces of individual news. Starting off with the first one, we can see separatists in Mariupol. Of course, these are just pictures of them. They tried to get, I guess, the most badass looking guy out of the group right there for their picture. And we can see that they're getting the lighting perfect and everything. It's almost like they're propaganda pictures. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we're going to see Chechens proud of their looting abilities. So let's check out this video and see what they've gotten. So as we see, this guy's got a bike. You see him talking about the stuff inside of that storage unit. And we see him going in there to take a better look. Now he's getting a better bike. He's getting an upgrade. I gotta tell you, the Tic Tac army never makes their situation better. They always just look so goofy with everything they do. The faked footage, the looting, and they're proud of it. I mean, it's just goofy. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news in Mariupol, where we can see, of course, you know who, Chechens in Mariupol. Here's the video of that. As you can see, once again, incredible handling of the rifle. The butt of the rifle is on his shoulder. Of course, this is actually kind of a strategy of just blind firing around a wall. And so you can't obviously put that on your shoulder, or you would be looking around the wall, obviously. But still, just so good. And they take turns. They're very friendly. They're very friendly people with each other. They really think a lot about friendship and sharing. And so they're sharing all this window amongst the 3 of them, and they're taking turns shooting out of it into the same place. Once again, they're of course not taking any fire from any of the buildings around them, which of course brings up the question, is this faked or not? And I'd have to say, without going down the whole rabbit hole that we've gone down many nights before, and if you're new to the stream, welcome. Make sure to subscribe and like if you do enjoy this content. But y'all have heard me go down this rabbit hole before, and so you know that I think it's probably faked. Now you can see them sitting around in there because, of course, no one's shooting at them, so they're not under any pressure, and they're not just casually milling about in there. We can now see this guy once again handling the rifle with great control, a very accurate spread. We can actually see this guy doing something that looked a little bit competent. We can also see this bad dude actually standing in front of where the rocket will be heading, which tells me that there's nothing down that way. That's, once again, another propaganda video. Or this guy is actually standing on the wall of a building and they're actually standing right beside it there. I can't really tell because this guy kind of moved out to the same spot, which may tell me that this guy's actually on a wall, but still. They all just take turns in the same spot. It just tells me that it's full of BS because they never receive any fire, and then they just stand out in the open. They're like, pick a pose, and they pick a pose, and then they just dump their mags. It's silly. It's just goofy. You know that's not real. Anyways, we're now going to move on into the Azovstal, which now appears to become a graveyard for Ukrainian vehicles, and I'm assuming because there's not really suitable locations to hide Ukrainian vehicles inside of the Azovstal, but today we can see once again that the Russians have destroyed another vehicle of the Ukrainians inside of the Azovstal metallurgical plant. As you can see right there, and I'll rewind it, another Ukrainian vehicle was destroyed. I believe at this point, I don't know if the Ukrainians have an option or a choice with this anymore, but they may want to start trying to hide these vehicles somewhere outside of the Azovstal, because over the past few days we're starting to see a trend that vehicles in the Azovstal are getting destroyed at a pretty high rate. So hopefully that can be fixed soon. And if the Ukrainians cannot fix that situation and these vehicles are kind of stuck in the Azovstal in some way, hopefully they're being abandoned before the crew can get injured or killed in these unfortunate strikes. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news where we're going to see a BTR-82 in action in Mariupol. Let's check this video out. Is that rust on the barrel? Looks like rust on the barrel to me. Anyways, we're going to move on. I have to say, I'm really interested by the BTR. Oh look, this guy spit out gum. Look, isn't that rude? How rude. Anyways. Now we see the BTR-82 is moving around, and that's the end of the video. Really self-explanatory. Just once again, another vehicle in action, a BTR-82 to be exact. So we're now going to move on to the last bit of news inside of Mariupol, where we see more Russian armored vehicles involved in the fighting in Mariupol. These are mostly lighter vehicles. As we can see in this video, it's a BMP-3 at the start moving down the road with Z's all over it. Now we can see a ZSU. Actually, it's an MTLB with a ZSU turret. Very interesting little modification there. See, now it's moving away.
Что сейчас происходит? Насколько близко уже к заводу? Расскажи о ситуации.
До завода остались считанные километры.
Oh my god, this guy's got the voice of a kid. He's got the face of a he's got the 1,000-yard stare and the voice of a kid. He's like Mike Tyson in a way.
Что сейчас происходит? Насколько близко уже к заводу? Расскажи о ситуации.
Listen to this guy.
До завода остались считанные километры. Как вы догадались, это населенный пункт Мариуполь. Проводится вооруженными силами ДНР зачистка данного населенного пункта. Это, получается, окраина ближе к заводу Ильича. Противник засел в домах, прикрывается мирным населением, ожесточенно сопротивляется. Но вооруженные силы Народной Республики проводят зачистку населенного пункта. Я так думаю, к исходу дня...
Alright, so I've had enough of Winnie the Pooh talking. We're going to skip forward and see some more armored action. See, now the BMP is backing up and firing. Now those BMPs can hit it in reverse. And we see Winnie the Pooh right there. He let out his famous war cry that he was known to let out in the animated series. And so with that, that's really the end of this video, but I'm going to let it run until it ends. And then we heard Winnie the Pooh say Slava Russia. I don't really remember that in the animated series, but I'm sure the Russians have made some modifications to the rip-off version that was standing right there. We're now going to move out of Mariupol. Of course, we don't know how long the city lasts. We know that Zelensky is viewing Mariupol as a very important and key strategic resource for the Ukrainians to hold. So that may suggest that there's a change in strategy, or there's never been a change in strategy, and I've just been misunderstanding the situation in that area. And it appears that the Ukrainians may be attempting to bolster Mariupol and ensure that the city will hold. So we're now going to move on further down the country towards the area in Kherson, and specifically the village of Holopristan, where we can see that a football game was held by the locals. Although this village is occupied, they brought out Ukrainian flags and they played a football game. And when I say football, I don't mean American football, I mean European football. It's a little confusing, but it is football nonetheless. And something like 100 people attended the football game. So that was really neat. It's good to know that they're still trying to keep up their spirits and that they're not going to let the Russians make them hide their Ukrainian patriotism. A wonderful thing to see. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the Mykolaiv area, where we can see here that another large explosion rocked the city of Mykolaiv over the past 24 hours. So I'm going to let y'all see that footage. And just to answer everyone, because I just opened up the comments and looked down, and everyone's saying soccer. No, I'm not calling it soccer. There's American football and there's European football. I'm sorry, that's just the thing I do. I don't understand how we're going to call it soccer when that game is actually played with your feet. Football, you only use your foot in football when you punt the ball, which is a very rare occurrence in the game itself, and you actually have to have a specific person whose role is to punt the football. So I think more, I think European football actually deserves the title of football more. I don't know how it got soccer. I don't know where soccer comes from. So I'm sorry if that does bug some of y'all, but I call it European football, and then American football is American football. So we're going to let the video continue. As you can see, the explosion occurred in the distance. Of course, it's shown like a sun in the beginning of it. And with that, that's the end of the video. We don't know exactly what exploded near Mykolaiv or why. We just know that there was an explosion that rocked the city today. We'll try and get some more information as the days go by. And so with that, we're now going to move into Russia first, and then we're going to cover our international news that doesn't really pertain to the war last. Firstly, in Moscow, we've seen a news article saying that students are turning in their teachers who do not believe in the war. Students have now taken it upon themselves in some kind of purge, like they used to do in the 30s, to report teachers who are not really into the Juche ideology in a way in Russia. Very, very frightening thing, really, because now it's going to start going into that kind of time, like back in the Stalinist days, where parents couldn't trust their kids because their kids may report them to their teachers, and teachers can't trust their parents because their parents may report their own kids. I think that's where Russia's starting to go, and I think there's a good reason why, because here in this mall, we can see that anti-theft devices are being put on every single item for sale in the store, which is showing that economic sanctions are really starting to take a great hold, because people are now starting to steal so many common items that are really just low in terms of price and value, that they're now having to put anti-theft devices all over them to make sure that they can keep their inventory on the shelves. That's really interesting to me, and that does show me that economic sanctions are in fact working, and while the Russians are insisting that they're rebounding from these sanctions, they are not, or else this would not be an occurrence. So we're now going to move on to the two bits of international news we've gotten today, and the first bit of news we've gotten is in Serbia, as the Chinese have delivered a shipment of missiles. We have a news article right here attached that explains this, and I'm going to read it a little bit. I picked this from the Associated Press because the Associated Press is, not really picking too many sides most of the time, but nonetheless, we can see here that a Y-20 transport plane landed at Belgrade's airport carrying HQ-22 surface-to-air missile systems. Let's pull up the HQ-22 and see what it's capable of. HQ-22, Sam. That should get us a better answer. So we don't really have a lot of information on it, actually. The flight altitude is 50 meters to 27 kilometers. Gee. It's in service from 2017 to present. Fairly new weapon system. But we don't really have a lot of information beyond that, at least on the Wikipedia page. Maybe we can find some more. It has a range of 170 kilometers, according to Hindustan News. It doesn't look like it has, well, range down here on Military Today. Once again, it says 170 kilometers. It has a missile weight of 1,300 kilograms and has missile length of 7 meters. So it sounds to me like just a normal surface-to-air missile, honestly. I was trying to say something that would be a little bit more profound than that, but really it's just a surface-to-air missile system. I don't really know the exact details of whether the Serbians bought them or this is some kind of aid that the Chinese are sending. But nonetheless, it is something that did occur today. I am going to look more into it. I saw it, and I tried to read a little bit about it, but once again, I came home from 12 hours of filming and immediately sat down and started doing this. So unfortunately, I couldn't read too much into it, so everyone forgive me for that. But we're now going to move on to something I was able to read about a little bit more, and that's that the current Pakistani Prime Minister named Imran Khan has lost the election in Pakistan, and now he's threatening martial law if they do not give him another election. This appears to be corruption on the highest level as far as the Pakistanis could be concerned. This isn't the first time this has happened in their country, though. This has actually happened a couple of times before. But this is showing that his administration apparently has been unpopular because he lost to the opposition, apparently by a very large margin. Nonetheless, there's the article below that talks a little bit more about it if you would like to know about it. And so with that, that is going to be the end of the news tonight. So we're going to start answering questions. If y'all did enjoy the stream tonight, make sure to subscribe if you're a new viewer, and make sure to like the stream because it does help us out a lot. And once again, Mondays will be taken off as usual, so there will be no stream tomorrow on Monday. So I thank you all once again, and if you want to hang around for the questions, feel more than welcome to, and try and ask some questions. They will most likely be answered tonight if we can find them. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so we are still sitting under $11,000. However, we are getting close to reaching that figure. One of our largest donations that have come in the last little bit here has been a $50 donation from Orlos the Druid. And I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it properly. Orlos the Druid. Okay, so thank you very much for your donation. And thank you to everyone for all of your donations. We are very, very close to 11,000, as I just mentioned. So our first question up is from Old Salty Squid, who says, Enforcer, what's your thoughts on the M1 versus Russian tanks? Thanks for all you guys do.
It depends on what variant you're talking about of the M1, like the M1, the IPM1, the M1A1, the M1A1HC, the M1A2, the M1A2 SEP V3, the M1A2 SEP V2, the M1, there's like a million of them. There's a million different variants of the Abrams. But if you're talking about the most normal one, which is the M1A2, and you're comparing it against Russian vehicles, well, I mean, like, the comparison isn't even the same. I mean, like, the M1A2 would floor most Russian vehicles. In Iraq, they floored all kinds of Russian vehicles. Although they were older versions, you've got to remember that under all that neat-looking stuff that they put on the Russian tanks that they're using today, they are still the base model T-72As that you saw the American tanks flooring in Iraq. So I think if you were to put those up front to front to each other, the M1 would win almost every time. I'm not saying every time M1 Abrams can be destroyed. It's just that I believe they would be destroyed at a higher frequency than the T-72s. So I hope that does answer the question in a short way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Duncan VR, who says, I heard on the news that Ukraine is preparing for a major battle. Is this true? And if so, where in Ukraine?
I believe they are preparing for a major battle, and I believe that term is being exaggerated a little bit. I think the proper term would be offensive, because they're not looking at any specific part on the front line where there will be a, like, quote-unquote battle, like the battle for Severodonetsk or Kharkiv. More so, it's like an offensive out of their reorganized front lines in the southeast. So I think they're preparing. I'm not really sure if it's going to happen, but once again, for the Russians to actually do anything meaningful and try and close out this war for themselves, something meaningful must come out of something, and right now there is nothing that they can say they've done. And so I'm assuming that some kind of offensive will be conducted, and the most logical one would be an offensive to retake the rest of the Donetsk area and the small bits of the Luhansk region that they have not taken yet. So I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. Once again, take it with a grain of salt because, you know, I don't know everything. So I try and answer everything based off of my knowledge and what I know, but sometimes it can be wrong. But that's my opinion on it, so I hope that does help and answer the question in a way. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from a very long-time channel supporter, Speedbreak. He says, Enforcer, if the Ukraine decides to mount an offensive into the Donbass or Mariupol, what strategic areas, cities, or airports do they need to take to get a good foothold?
Ooh, what? That's a good question. That's a good question. But the thing is that a lot of people who are new may have never been around to see this. And if so, let me pull up Google My Maps and introduce you to my day one map. Let's see, there's a lot of them now, but let me go back and try and find the one that was brand new. I think this was March 11th. Fairly new. Anyways, this map has never really been published, but this was my opening map. This was like in the first 3 days of the war, although this was posted on March 11th. It was, well, actually, it was last edited on March 1st. So you can see there that it's been around for quite some while. This was actually around on the first few days of the war. And this is what I said Ukraine would look like if the Russians would succeed in their objectives. They would push down to Kyiv and try and encircle the city on the western side. They would also try it on the eastern side, and what was very important for them on this side was to secure Brovary. I made sure to include that in the area. I also said they were going to try and encircle Kharkiv, Sumy, and they were also going to push out of the Crimean area towards Mykolaiv, because I said Mykolaiv was an important strategic port city in a way, and also it was a gateway on towards Odessa. Also marked Odessa as a naval invasion area, and I said that they would take Melitopol and push on towards Zaporizhia in that direction. The naval invasion hadn't happened yet, so I assumed that they were just going to keep on pushing towards the Donetsk area and then try and peel the Ukrainians off of their defensive lines there. But then the naval invasion happened and kind of changed that away. But you can see that initially these calls were spot on. Like, it was crazy spot on, because if you go to the next map, Google My Maps, and this is all to explain why I don't really give away Ukrainian stuff. We go to day 14, which was week 2. You can see here. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. That's not recent enough. Let me go to the next one. This one here. There was a point where everything on that map. Oh, that's not it. That's day 42. Okay, hang on. So, hang on, everyone. I'm going to try and find this map, because there was a specific map where almost everything I said happened at the same time, and it was insane. And everyone who was on the stream was like, "Oh my god!" It was like it literally happened. Oh, whatever. I'm not going to keep looking for it. But anyways, you can see here I was squiggling all over. But everything I put on this original map came true at some point, one point or another. Sumy almost got encircled, and then that encirclement was broke. Kharkiv had breakthrough convoys encircle the city, and for about a day or two, it was declared that the city was under siege, and then after that, it was declared it was broken. So this came true. And then in the Kyiv area, this came true entirely. They launched paratroopers in Vasilkiv and managed to capture that town. And then the mayor of Kyiv and President Zelensky all said that the city had been surrounded on all sides and that a siege was underway. And so this right here actually happened. Although I think the breakthrough convoy actually came from Konotov and came down here and kind of created this encirclement. Although at the time it looked like they were coming from Chernihiv. So I really can't tell, but that's the information we were getting at the time. So the original estimates were spot on, and that's why I'm kind of scared to like just casually say what I think the Ukrainians are going to do, because it's like, what if I'm spot on again and the Russians have never thought about what I'm going to say, and then they're like, oh, well, what if they did do that? And what if like there was a Russian watching this thing? Because like there could be all kinds of people watching this thing. There could be people from the US federal government, the Russian government, the British government. You never know. And so I don't really want to be giving away anything that the Ukrainians might be planning or thinking of and saying what they would need to take in order to succeed at some goals, because it may actually turn out to be true, and then you're giving away information that they may have not thought about. So I thank you very much for the question, but that's the reason why I really can't answer it. So I thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Daniel Simpkins, who says, why haven't the Ukrainians been supplied with the Iron Dome system like Israel has?
I'm not exactly sure. I don't know what company produces the Iron Dome system. Who produces the Iron Dome? Rafael Defense Systems, Israel Aerospace Industries. So apparently it's an Israeli company. That's some kind of subsidiary or branch company of Rafael, which I believe is a French company. I don't know why they haven't gotten that. Maybe it's because the cost is $50 million per battery, and then it's 100,000, 150,000 per interception. So I'm not entirely sure why. But there may be a whole bunch of factors at play that kind of explain why they haven't gotten something like that. So I kind of hope that answers the question in a way. Unfortunately, that's a little bit too detailed for me to get into in like a split second. But I do thank you very much for the question. It was a good one. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from longtime channel supporter Montern, who says, Enforcer, have you heard about North Korea planning to test more nukes underground?
I have not heard that. That's really interesting. I do know about one of their previous missile tests apparently causing a stir. Once again, they always cause a stir, so it's not really surprising that it did again. But I did not hear that they're going to probably be conducting tests underground, and that'll be really interesting to see, because we know that the Indians and I believe the Pakistanis also conducted their nuclear tests underground. So thank you very much for sharing that information with us. But unfortunately, I didn't actually know that that was a thing. So thank you once again. That's invaluable information. I'll make sure to try and look into it when I can. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Wretched Youth, who says, are Western powers sending any tanks to Ukraine?
Yes, apparently the British are sending armored vehicles to Ukraine. I don't know what that encompasses, though. They said 150 of them. I know that probably doesn't include Challenger 2s because they have a very limited number of those. So I don't know if they're talking about like warriors or just cars or some kind of their version of an MRAP. I can't really tell you. But I do know that they are sending armored vehicles, and we do know that the Czechs, the Slovaks, and a couple of other countries, I believe, at this point, have sent the Ukrainians tanks like T-72s and such. So the answer to that question is yes. Western countries have been sending tanks into Ukraine. So I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you very much for it. It was a good question. And so with that, we're going to answer 5 more questions from the chat, and then we're going to wrap up this stream for tonight. And so with that, what is the next question?
And with that being said, we have just hit 11,000 on the donations, and we were put over that mark by Dark Side of the Loon 57, who put in a $50 donation. Thank you all. We have reached $1,000 more than we had originally anticipated, and it couldn't be possible without all of your donations. So thank you very, very much for all of the donations. Next up, we have a question from. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
All right. The next question up is from Zeta Lane, a longtime channel supporter, as many of you know. They say, Enforcer, do we know how large the International Legion is now? Without giving anything away, do we know anything about how organized, commanded, and deployed?
Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but the International Legion, we know that there was initially 16,000 members. Y'all won't believe this, but my nose just started bleeding out of the blue right now. But I'm going to try and manage that and answer your question at the same time. It appears that there was about 16,000 initial members that joined the Foreign Legion. I'm sorry if my voice sounds weird now, but there were 16,000 of them. We know that there's, of course, been more members joining the Foreign Legion, but we're not exactly sure how much. So I'm sorry that the answer has to be a little brief. I am holding my nose together, and I do feel the blood flowing through. Thank you, by the way. Thank you so much. Matthew just came in clutch and actually got me some paper napkins to put on that, so thank him so much for that. But to answer that question now that I got that fixed, We know that there's initially 16,000, but we don't really know anymore about how many extra forces there have been. But we do know that they're incredibly organized because we've been seeing them used to great effect. So I hope that answers the question fairly well. And I thank you so much for always being here every night and supporting. And I know that you've done your part and chipped in with your support for Mercy Corps tonight. So I thank you very much once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And you know, it's strange that the enforcer has a nosebleed and also a headache earlier because, especially where we visited today, it's kind of a odd coincidence. But nonetheless, moving on. The next question is from Vicious Tuna, who says, Enforcer, I heard the Russians bombed a train station in or near the Donbass where people were trying to leave. Do you have any details in Slava Ukraine?
Yes, unfortunately, those details were lost due to a black hole in a way because of a computer glitch that I had. So 2 days of information were completely erased. But you could see those 2 days on stream. I believe it was day 42, 43, and 44, I believe, that are now gone. But yes, that was a attack at the Kramatorsk railway station that left 50 killed and 150 wounded. So it was a terrible attack. It was conducted by Tochka cruise missiles. And a lot of people have been saying, oh, a lot of deniers that are always trying to like call false flag. And another thing I'd like to say is that I wish that everyone would stop calling false flags. Everything that happens in this war isn't a false flag, because everyone's always trying to call it on everything and say the other side is trying to make it look like the other side is doing something. It's like, don't you think it'd be a lot easier if that side just actually did it, But anyways, a lot of people are trying to say, oh, it's a false flag because Russia doesn't use Tochkas. But the truth is that they do. Both sides use Tochkas. But those Tochkas went straight to Kramatorsk, landed near the railway station, killed 50 people nearly immediately, and you can find a lot of gruesome pictures online of the aftermath of that, and then they wounded hundreds more. So, yeah, yes, I do have news on it. You can go back and watch the Day 42 or the Day 43 stream, and that news is on there if you would like. So I hope that does answer the question in a way, and so we're going to move on to our third to last question.
Okay, and the next one is coming from Freedom Principle, who says, Enforcer, as a USAF vet, tell me how I'm thinking, please. It's so important that Mariupol could hold, because Russians moving north from there could already be west of the Ukrainians in Donetsk and Luhansk.
That is true, and I can see what you're saying there, and I've been thinking about that as well. The thing is that if Mariupol fell, in my opinion, the advantage that they've given the Ukrainians for this long is invaluable. They've given the Ukrainians an advantage for nearly 43 days in that area. And considering that Russian logistics have never really recouped after the initial days and the shock of the Ukrainian defense hit their logistical forces, and they weren't ever really able to rebound, and they haven't ever been able to actually supply all of their units all the supplies they need. So I think at this point, they've served their purpose, and if they were to fall, the thousands of soldiers that are probably tied up in this battle of Mariupol will be sent across the rest of the front lines, but they'll have to be spread out, or they'll use them in some kind of spearhead, crowd a battlefield, and then that spearhead will most likely be quashed somewhere. They may get far, but it will be quashed, and then the Russians will be stuck wherever they are then. So I hope that answers that question in a way. I thank you very much for the question. It is an interesting one. And I thank you so much for your service. We do have a lot of former veterans on here that ask a lot of questions. And I do appreciate that a lot of people value my input. Unfortunately, I think my input may be a little bit bad right now because I have a giant paper towel slammed onto my face and I'm trying to look through it at the map. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the second to last question. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And Enforcer, I've noticed a lot of people mentioning that a headache and a nosebleed can indicate high blood pressure. So would you like to call the stream short tonight, or would you like to answer a question or two more?
Nah, we can keep going. I mean, high pressure is for like weaklings. I'll just deal with it. It'll be fine. So anyways, on to the next question.
Okay. So the next one is from Time Out, who says, any word on the missile coming from the UK to Ukraine?
Any news on the Harpoon missiles?
They say Marlet, but they might have mistyped.
Let me type that in. The Marlet missile. Marlet missile. Let's see what we got. Marlet missile. Let's see. Marlet missile. Okay, let's see what we got here. Marlet missiles. Future air-to-surface guided weapon. But what's the range on that baby? Maximum speed, Mach 1.5. That doesn't really tell us the range. Fortunately, I haven't... Apparently they're using them. Apparently it says on the Wikipedia page they may be using them. But I don't really have any news on them, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to plead ignorance on that one and say I can't really give you an answer because I really don't know enough about that certain situation. Once again, I would like to let everyone know that while all of y'all do value my statements, and I thank you very much for that, and I find it very honorable that y'all think so highly of my statements, I'm not an expert on everything, so things like that do go under my radar, and I really can't talk about them too well. And so with that, I thank you so much for the question. It was a good question, and I'm sorry I really couldn't answer it too well. And with that, we're going to move on to our last question. And so, who is the lucky last person who got in the last question of the night?
And the lucky last person of the night is Galaxy Rider, who says, any equipment loss numbers for Russia?
Actually, we don't have any equipment loss numbers for the Russians right now. The last time I've been able to get a hold of that number was for April 6th, and they lost 18,900 killed, and they had around 800 tanks lost and around 1,600 to 1,500 armored personnel carriers destroyed. The aircraft were over into the hundreds now. It's like 150 aircraft and around 170, 180 helicopters. So that was the last figures we got. We don't know how many more losses they've taken over the past 4 days, but that gives you a general idea of how bad it was for them about 4 days ago. So I hope that kind of answers the question in a way the best I could cover it. And so with that, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I hope y'all have all enjoyed so much. It was a lot of fun for me. We, of course, stream every single day at 10 p.m. Eastern Time from Tuesday to Sunday, and Mondays are taken off. So tomorrow, there will be no stream. So if I see any of y'all asking, where's tonight's stream? I'm going to be like, why are y'all aren't listening to me? So anyways, I thank y'all all so much for watching. I appreciate y'all all so much. And I thank y'all once again for coming together and helping to achieve this great goal that we had tonight of raising $10,000. And not only did we raise $10,000, we got up to over $11,000, which is a huge deal. And it lets me know that people still do care about this war, and then we still all support Ukraine. And so I thank y'all all so much, and I hope y'all have a great night. Take care, and I'll see y'all Tuesday.